Hello, I've been a long-time fan and follower of the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I've discovered so many great books through this award, so it's very exciting that they have just launched a sister prize, the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. And this is really great for me as a reader because I primarily read novels, and especially in the past couple of years, I've been trying to incorporate more nonfiction into my reading. And other than reading books about subjects that I'm naturally interested in, I primarily find great nonfiction books through book awards. And so to have a new prize that celebrates nonfiction books from a female point of view is just fantastic. And they have just announced their long list for the very first year of this prize. So I want to browse through these books and give brief descriptions and overviews of them. And I think it's going to be a case of sort of picking and choosing different books to try out and read because like the fiction long list, this is quite a long list of 16 books. And as with a lot of nonfiction, a lot of these books tend to be quite a lot longer. There's multiple books on this long list that are over 500 pages long. So because of like time constraints and stuff, it's really going to be a case of picking and choosing between them. But I think it's really fantastic that there is such a long list because it encompasses so much different subject matter of medicine and art history and travel writing and memoir and history and technology and science and investigative journalism. So many different subjects covered. All of them sound really fascinating. So it'll be quite an endeavor to read the entire long list if you want to take on that challenge. But I'd love to know which of these books you're interested in reading, or if you have read any of them, which would you recommend? The short list of 6 books is going to be announced on March 27th, and then the winner of the very first year of this nonfiction book award is going to be announced on June 13th alongside the winner of the fiction prize. First, there is The Britannias, An Island Quest by Alice Albinia, and this looks at the history of Britain through its islands, from ancient history to more modern times, of the culture and language and communities that have developed on these islands and how that is connected with the mainland or been completely separate from that. The author, Camilla Shamsi, says of this book that a beautifully written account of 5,000 years and many of Britain's islands. It covers and explores the histories in plain sight and those out of view. And of course, those out of view are very often to do with the lives of women. Vulture Capitalism, which is subtitled Corporate Crimes, Backdoor Bailouts, and the Death of Freedom by Grace Blakeley. This book looks at how the free markets aren't actually free and that wealth doesn't trickle down in the way that they say it will. And rather than this capitalist system being broken, it's actually working exactly as planned. So the author investigates powerful corporations and how they have created this modern system of capitalism. The judge, Venetia Lamana, says Vulture Capitalism is life-changing and will shift your perspective on capitalism itself. Important, compelling, and hopeful, this book has altered how I see the world. Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution by Kat Bohannon. Traditionally, the scientific study of evolution has focused more on the male body, so this book shifts that perspective, looking at the evolution of the female body over time and how it's contributed to Homo sapiens becoming the dominant species in the world. Intervals by Marianne Bruckner. In 2009, the author's mother was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, and this led her to make big changes, incorporating more creativity and activism into her life, although this became more limited as she became more ill. So it follows this moving journey until 2019 when her mother died. And the judge, Susanna Lipscomb, says this is an important, harrowing book that is moving and thought-provoking on the issue of assisted dying. It is a work of both activism and memoir, written in haunting prose. Shadows at Noon, the South Asian 20th Century by Joya Chatterji. This looks at the modern history of the subcontinent through independence and partition and the forging of modern nations, and most histories of this region focus on the politics, but this incorporates a lot more about food and leisure and households to highlight how there are so many commonalities between India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. This is the longest book on this long list. It's 864 pages long, but I'm especially interested in reading this because I'm currently rereading A Passage to India with my online book club. So I think this will give like a great background and foundation to the history of this region to go alongside this fiction. Thunderclap, a memoir of art and life and Sudden Death by Laura Cumming. This book looks at a historical incident of a gunpowder explosion which occurred in the mid-1600s in the Dutch city of Delft, and this killed many people, including the artist Karel Fabricius, who was only 32 years old at the time and was famous for creating the artwork known as the Goldfinch, which was the painting at the center of Donna Tartt's novel. But in this book, she also explores the life of her father, who was also an artist that died too young. The judge, Anne Seba, says, "I love this book because of the way she intertwines a subtle and tender love of her father with a deep understanding of Dutch art." Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in the Philippines by Patricia Evangelista. The author is a journalist who for 6 years chronicled the killings carried out by police and vigilantes in the name of the president's war on drugs. And this led to the slaughter of thousands of people. So it looks at what happens when an elected president values some lives over others. I remember this book being highlighted as one of the best books published last year, and the judge, Susanna Lipscomb, says that this is one of the most important books I've ever read. Wifedom, Mrs. Orwell's Invisible Life by Anna Funder. This book uses new research into the correspondence of Eileen O'Shaughnessy, who is George Orwell's wife, and looks at her influence upon his work and his life throughout the Spanish Civil War and World War II in London, and how she was pushed to the side and her influence has been previously unacknowledged. And I've heard so many good things about this book, and I'm really interested in it, especially because recently I reread 1984, and I also read Julia, Sandra Newman's new take and different version of the events and story of 1984. So this will be so fascinating to finally read. Matrescence, on the metamorphosis of pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood by Lucy Jones. A lot of literature depicts the process of having child as this glowing period in a woman's life, but this book uses new studies in science and psychology and sociology and economics and ecology to understand how this creates monumental changes in a woman's life and on her body. The judge Venetia Lamana says of this book that it's a must-read for everybody, a pioneering, enthralling book that will shift how we view motherhood. Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World by Naomi Klein. This book begins as a very personal account about how the author's identity has often been mixed up in public with the public figure Naomi Wolf, and how Naomi Wolf's recent posts and public appearances have included a lot of dangerous ideas, and how this has led to a lot of complications for Naomi Klein of receiving a lot of negative attention of people who have mixed her up with Wolf. But it goes on to explore how we have become such politically divided nations and a politically divided world, and how our online identities and our own personal brands have kind of contributed to these divides. So it goes from this much more personal story to a much more larger look at a lot of the most important questions that we're facing in our civilization and within our politics. And I read this very recently, and I found it a very powerful book. I'm especially since I myself have experienced this issue of my identity being mixed up with another person and getting some negative messages that are seemingly out of nowhere, and this can be very disconcerting. But she shows how this is all part of much larger things which are occurring within our society. And so this book has also been shortlisted for the nonfiction category of the Writers' Prize, alongside the book Thunderclap. And I always think that when books have been nominated for multiple awards, that's a very good sign. A Flat Place by Noreen Masud. The author gives an account of traveling through and examining a number of landscapes around the United Kingdom that are naturally flat, and how she, as someone of British Pakistani heritage, is both of this environment and feels outside of it, but also examining how her past history and trauma has led her emotions to being flattened out. Camilla Shamsi says of this book, "I love this for its originality and its intelligence. It is revelatory about both people and places." All that she carried, the journey of Ashley's sack, a black family keepsake by Tiya Miles. In the mid-1800s, an enslaved woman named Rose learned that her daughter Ashley was about to be sold. So she went on the run, and all she took with her was a cotton sack with a few belongings. And she was separated from Ashley, who was sold. And then many decades later, Ashley's granddaughter took this sack and embroidered upon it the story of their family. So this branches out into a much larger story of enslaved people and how their stories have been erased, and how we can only know about them through these small traces that have been left behind. I know this book won the National Book Award for nonfiction a few years ago, but I think it was only just recently published here in the UK, and I've heard so many great things about this book. Code Dependent, Living in the Shadow of AI by Madhumita Murgia. This book examines how there's a lot of automated decision-making involved in using computers and technology, and how this is having a massive influence on our behavior and actually a relinquishment of our moral authority. So it examines strategies of how we can try to reclaim our free will in this modern age. So it sounds like a very timely book, and it'll be especially interesting to read, having just read Doppelganger. And I really like how a number of these books seem to be touching upon similar topics, but looking at them from different angles. The Dictionary People, the Unsung Heroes Who Created the Oxford English Dictionary by Sarah Ogilvie. So if you asked me who wrote the OED, I would just assume it was created by experts, but she touches upon the stories of thousands of people and members of the public who contributed to the creation of this dictionary, which has obviously had such a massive influence upon our language and how we use words in everyday life. Judge Anne Seba says, I adore this book because it's about words, and what could be more important than words and the way we use them? Young Queens, The Intertwined Lives of Catherine de' Medici, Elizabeth de Valois, and Mary Queen of Scots by Redmond Chang. This book looks at the history of these three different women in the 16th century in Europe and how they had a friendship and connection with each other at the French court, but they separately went off to rule different kingdoms, and the great perils that they experienced and the trials that they went through, and how this contributed to the formation of these countries. This sounds like such a fun and fascinating book. And finally, there is How to Say Babylon, a Jamaican memoir by Safiya Sinclair. The author gives an account of growing up in Jamaica in a family where their father was a member of a militant sect of Rastafari who rallied against Babylon and having any Western influence in his household, but how her mother also introduced her to a love of books and literature, and eventually the author rebelled against her father and had to leave her family to create an independent life for herself. So it follows her harrowing journey. I remember hearing the author speak about this book early last year at a literature event, and she spoke so poignantly, and it sounds like such a moving story. So those are the 16 books on the very first Women's Prize for Nonfiction long list. Lots to choose from. I think I'm first going to read Thunderclap and also Wifedom, because those are books that I've already been wanting to get to, but I'm hoping to explore some more of these books over time. But in early March, we are also going to get the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction, so there'll be lots more books to choose from then. But I'd love to know what you think of any of these books. Which of these are you interested in reading now? Or have you read any of these books, and what do you think of them? What would you recommend that I read first? I'd really love to hear about that in the comments below. But yeah, it's so wonderful that this new prize has been created. I'll be interested to follow it over the first half of this year, leading up to the winner announcement. But thank you for watching me discuss all of these books, and I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.